with $14 left and an eviction notice in my pocket, I held my shivering daughter in the roaring rain, completely ruined, until the bustling corporate lobby fell into a dead silence. Vivian Vance, the billionaire, ice queen of Manhattan, and my untouchable college classmate from 7 years ago, stopped her designer heels right in front of my worn-out shoes. Draping her cashmere coat over my trembling shoulders, she effortlessly scooped up my child and ordered her assistant to cancel her entire week. As she pinned me with a fiercely possessive gaze and commanded, "You are coming home with me," I realized this rescue was no coincidence. The city's most powerful titan had been watching me from the shadows for 7 silent years, and her final claim had just begun. Welcome to GL Diary. Sometimes the most unexpected turns lead us exactly where we need to be. What happens next is something I never saw coming, and I think you'll find it just as surprising. Stick around for the conclusion. It's a reminder that it's never too late for a new chapter. If you enjoy discovering these hidden gems, I'd be honored to have you follow for more. The heavy rain battered relentlessly against the massive glass doors of the towering lobby. I held my 4-year-old daughter tight against my chest to share my fading body heat. Lily was shivering quietly in my arms. My bank account currently showed a pathetic balance of exactly $14. The eviction notice was still heavily crumpled inside my soaked coat pocket. I truly had nowhere left to go in this unforgiving city. People in tailored designer suits hurried past us without offering a single second glance. We were entirely invisible in this glittering world of extreme wealth and power. Then, the ambient temperature in the sprawling rooms seemed to drop drastically. The bustling corporate lobby instantly fell into a dead, nervous silence. I slowly looked up from the cold marble floor. Vivian Vance was walking gracefully through the spinning revolving doors. She was the undisputed CEO of Vance Corp and universally known as the Ice Queen of Manhattan. We had attended the exact same college 7 long years ago. She was always impossibly out of my league, untouchable, and painfully perfect. I instinctively tried to shrink backward into the dark shadows of the pillar. I desperately did not want her to see me looking this broken and ruined. I turned my face away, silently praying she would just walk straight into her private elevator. The sharp, rhythmic click of her designer heels echoed loudly against the stone floor. The intimidating sound was steadily getting closer to my corner. The clicking abruptly stopped right in front of my worn-out shoes. I completely stopped breathing. A delicate, expensive scent of cedar and cold rain suddenly washed over me. I hesitantly raised my heavy eyes. Vivian was looking directly down at me. Her icy blue eyes held a profound emotion that I could not possibly decipher. She did not look at my soaked jacket or my pathetic state. Her piercing gaze was fixed intensely on my pale face. Then, she slowly looked down at the tiny girl clinging desperately to my neck. I painfully braced myself for her pity, or even worse, her absolute indifference. Instead, Vivian smoothly took off her custom cashmere trench coat. She stepped deliberately right into my personal space. The sudden heat radiating from her tall body was a staggering contrast to her freezing reputation. She gently draped the heavy, warm coat over Lily and my trembling shoulders. Her incredibly long fingers intentionally brushed against my bare, cold neck. A sudden, violent shiver ran straight down my spine that had absolutely nothing to do with the stormy weather. "Alara," she whispered softly. Her voice was incredibly low, dark, and shockingly gentle. It had been 7 entire years since I last heard her beautiful mouth shape my name. My throat immediately felt impossibly tight. "Vivian," I started to speak, but my fragile voice broke completely. She gracefully raised one hand to silence my frantic apologies. Her soft thumb lightly grazed my cheek, carefully wiping away a stray raindrop. My breath hitched violently at the completely unexpected intimacy of her touch. "You are freezing," she stated with quiet authority. She elegantly crouched down to perfectly meet my young daughter's wary eyes. "And who is this beautiful little angel?" she asked in a tone so sweet it shocked me. "This is Lily," I managed to choke out through my tightening throat. Vivian actually smiled. It was a devastatingly stunning smile that absolutely no one else in this corporate building had ever witnessed. She confidently extended her open arms toward my hesitant daughter. To my utter disbelief, shy little Lily leaned right into Vivian's welcoming embrace. Vivian stood up effortlessly with my daughter resting naturally against her tailored hip. She looked breathtakingly perfect holding my child. "Cancel all my meetings for the rest of the entire week," Vivian ordered her trailing assistant without even turning her head. The stunned assistant's jaw dropped, but she frantically scrambled to obey the sudden command. Vivian turned her magnetic, intense gaze back to me. Her striking eyes darkened with a quiet, terrifyingly fierce possessiveness. "You are coming home with me," she commanded flawlessly. It was definitively not a polite request. I instinctively opened my mouth to protest this overwhelming charity. "No arguments, Alara," she added, stepping even closer until our bodies almost touched. Her soft lips were now mere inches from my sensitive ear. "I have waited far too long to let you disappear into the rain again," she murmured against my skin. The raw, bleeding vulnerability in her hushed whisper made my erratic heart race out of control. She seamlessly shifted Lily's slight weight and reached out her elegant free hand to me. Her warm palm was open, silently waiting for my surrender. I looked down at her inviting hand, then back up into her deeply captivating eyes. The legendary Ice Queen was completely melting, but she was only doing it for me. I slowly placed my trembling, cold hand directly into hers. Her slender fingers intertwined with mine instantly and possessively. Her strong grip was deeply reassuring, securely anchoring my floating reality. She confidently led us toward her heavily guarded private elevator, leaving the entirely paralyzed lobby behind. The heavy steel doors slid shut, sealing the three of us in a deeply private, quiet space. She absolutely refused to let go of my hand. Instead, her thumb began drawing extremely slow, soothing circles on the sensitive back of my knuckles. The subtle, deliberate friction sent electric sparks shooting straight up my numb arm. I was financially ruined, newly homeless, and a desperate single mother. Yet, the absolute most powerful woman in the city was holding me like I was her greatest, most precious prize. I had absolutely no idea that she had been harboring this consuming obsession for 7 silent years. Today was merely the aggressive beginning of her final claim. The steady warmth of her holding hand promised a permanent safety I had never truly known. I simply could not bring myself to look away from her striking profile. Vivian leaned casually back against the polished steel wall, pulling me gently closer with her. The tiny space between our bodies practically vanished into thin air. Lily rested her exhausted head softly on Vivian's expensive shoulder, already falling fast asleep. "You are finally safe now," Vivian whispered, dropping her heavy gaze directly to my trembling lips. "Both of you." The private elevator ascended silently to the top floor of the Manhattan skyline. My heart hammered aggressively against my ribs with every floor we passed. Vivian's hand remained firmly and possessively interlocked with mine. Her thumb stroked my knuckles in a slow, hypnotic rhythm. The polished steel doors slid open to reveal a massive, dimly lit penthouse. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a breathtaking view of the rain-swept city below. The space was immaculate, yet it felt surprisingly warm and lived in. A subtle, expensive scent of bergamot and dark wood filled the quiet air. Lily shifted in Vivian's arms, burying her small face deeper into the cashmere coat. "Let's get you both out of these wet clothes," Vivian said quietly. Her voice completely lacked its usual, terrifying corporate edge. She guided us seamlessly down a wide, outlined hallway. We stopped directly in front of a heavy oak door. Vivian pushed it open effortlessly, revealing a meticulously decorated guest bedroom. My breath suddenly caught sharp in my throat. The room was not a standard, sterile guest suite for visiting clients. In the corner sat a beautifully crafted wooden toddler bed. A small, perfectly positioned shelf held an array of pristine children's books. Soft, pastel-colored plush toys were arranged neatly on a velvet armchair. It looked exactly like a room intentionally prepared for a 4-year-old girl. I turned to Vivian, confusion, and a sudden trace of panic rising in my chest. Vivian, what is this? I asked, my voice trembling slightly in the quiet space. She gently laid my sleeping daughter onto the center of the large mattress. She carefully pulled a thick down comforter over Lily's tiny, exhausted frame. Only then did she turn to fully face me. The city lights from the window cast sharp, beautiful shadows across her striking jawline. I like to be prepared, Alara, she murmured smoothly. Prepared for what? I haven't seen you in 7 long years. She closed the physical distance between us in 2 measured, deliberate steps. I backed up instinctively until my shoulders hit the solid wooden door frame. She raised her hand, resting her palm flat against the wood right beside my head. Her piercing blue eyes trapped me completely in place. I always knew you would eventually find your way back to me, she stated with absolute certainty. A heavy, suffocating silence stretched between us, thick with unspoken history. My pulse raced out of control as her eyes dropped briefly to my lips. Your jacket is soaked, she noted, her tone shifting to a quiet, dangerous concern. Before I could protest, her long fingers brushed against my cold collar. She deliberately unfastened the top button of my ruined, wet coat. Her smooth knuckles grazed the highly sensitive skin of my collarbone. A sharp jolt of pure electricity rushed straight to my core. I can do it myself, I whispered, though I made absolutely no physical move to stop her. She ignored my weak protest entirely. You have spent years doing everything yourself, she replied softly. She smoothly slid the wet fabric off my freezing, tense shoulders. The heavy jacket hit the hardwood floor with a soft, dismissive thud. Let me take care of you tonight. She stepped back just enough to let me breathe, though her intense presence still enveloped me. She walked over to an adjoining custom closet and pulled out a neatly folded silk robe. It was a deep, midnight blue that perfectly matched the cold color of her eyes. She held it open for me, offering a silent, undeniable invitation. I hesitated for a fraction of a second before slipping my bare arms into the smooth silk. The expensive material retained a faint, intoxicating trace of her signature perfume. She stepped directly behind me to tie the sash around my waist. Her arms wrapped loosely around my midsection to secure the silk knot. For one brief, breathless moment, her chest pressed flush against my back. I could feel the steady, powerful rhythm of her heartbeat through the thin fabric. There, she whispered, her lips brushing incredibly lightly against my damp hair. The bathroom is through that door. The water is already running. I turned around quickly, finding her face dangerously close to mine. Her composure was flawless, but a dark, consuming fire burned brightly behind her gaze. Why are you doing all of this, Vivian? I asked, desperately needing to understand this sudden salvation. She reached out, gently tucking a wet strand of hair behind my ear. Her touch lingered heavily on my jawline, burning my cold skin like a brand. Because the world completely failed you, Alara. Her thumb brushed slowly over my lower lip, sending a sudden flush of heat straight to my cheeks. And I plan to make absolutely sure it never gets the chance to hurt you again. She stepped back slowly, but the invisible tether between us only pulled tighter. Take a hot shower. I will be waiting right outside. She left the room gracefully, pulling the heavy door softly shut behind her. I stood perfectly still in the quiet, luxurious room. My ruined, shattered life had just collided with the one powerful woman who clearly wanted to own it. And terrifyingly, I realized I might actually want to let her. I looked down at my daughter, sleeping peacefully in a bed she had never seen before. It was exactly as if Vivian had built a sanctuary anticipating our exact moment of utter ruin. The implications of this perfect room were staggering. It meant she had been quietly watching me from the shadows. It meant she knew all about my struggles, my painful divorce, and my eviction. Yet she waited until I had absolutely nothing left before she finally stepped in to claim us. Was it incredible patience, or was it a flawlessly calculated strategy? I walked slowly into the luxurious ensuite bathroom. Thick, Warm steam already clouded the large glass shower enclosure. Expensive bath oils and plush white towels were laid out meticulously on the marble counter. I stripped off the rest of my damp, pathetic clothing with shaking hands. Stepping under the scalding hot water, I finally allowed myself to break down and cry. I cried for the tiny apartment I lost and the bank account I had completely drained. But mostly, I cried because for the first time in 7 years, I didn't feel entirely alone. The hot water washed away the grime and despair of the city streets. However, it could not wash away the lingering, burning sensation of Vivian's touch on my skin. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw her intense, unyielding gaze staring right through me. I wrapped myself tightly in the heavy silk robe and stepped back into the quiet bedroom. Lily was still deeply asleep, her breathing steady, safe, and calm. I cautiously cracked open the heavy oak door to peek out into the hallway. Vivian was leaning casually against the wall right outside, exactly as she had promised. She had discarded her formal, intimidating suit jacket. Her crisp white button-down shirt was rolled up cleanly to her forearms. She held a crystal glass of amber liquid loosely in one hand. When she heard the door creak, her sharp eyes snapped directly to mine. Her intense gaze slowly dragged down the entire length of my silk-clad body. A dark, undeniable satisfaction flared brightly in her ice-blue eyes. "Better?" she asked, her voice a low, gravelly hum in the quiet apartment. "Yes," I breathed out, stepping tentatively into the warm hall. She seamlessly handed me a steaming mug of tea from a nearby console table. Our fingers brushed again, and I felt that exact same electric spark ignite my nerve endings. "Drink," she commanded with an aggressive, underlying gentleness. "Then you are going to go to sleep." "Where are you going to sleep?" I asked, suddenly acutely aware of our physical proximity. She took a very slow sip from her glass, never once breaking our intense eye contact. "Right next door, Alara. Watching over exactly what belongs to me." Morning sunlight filtered brightly through the sheer custom curtains of the penthouse. I slowly opened my eyes to the unfamiliar, luxurious softness of high thread-count Egyptian cotton. For one terrifying second, my exhausted mind panicked, expecting the cold floor of my former apartment. Then, the heavy, intoxicating scent of cedar and dark wood flooded my waking senses. I turned my head quickly to see Lily still sleeping peacefully beside me. She looked like a tiny, perfectly safe angel in the center of the spacious mattress. I pulled the midnight blue silk robe tightly around my waist and quietly stepped out of the room. The sprawling penthouse was bathed in the warm, golden glow of the early morning sun. I padded barefoot down the long hallway toward the faint sound of a low, commanding voice. Vivian was standing confidently in the center of her state-of-the-art marble kitchen. She was dressed casually in a simple black silk camisole and matching wide-leg trousers. Her dark hair was tied up in a loose, messy bun, exposing the elegant curve of her neck. She held a sleek phone to her ear, her posture radiating absolute, lethal authority. "I don't care about the legal loopholes, Richard," she said coldly into the receiver. "You will immediately buy the entire management company that issued the eviction notice. And then you will terminate the landlord responsible, effective today." My breath caught sharply in my throat as the staggering scale of her words hit me. She was actively destroying the very people who had thrown my daughter and me onto the street. "And sure they never work in New York real estate again," Vivian added ruthlessly. She ended the call without waiting for a response and tossed the device onto the kitchen island. I took a hesitant step forward, my bare foot making a soft sound against the hardwood floor. Vivian turned around instantly, her sharp instincts practically predatory in the quiet room. The cold, merciless expression on her face vanished the exact second her blue eyes found mine. It was replaced immediately by a look of such overwhelming softness that my knees actually weakened. "Good morning," she murmured, her voice dropping to that incredibly intimate, gravelly register. "Morning," I whispered back, feeling acutely vulnerable wrapped in her personal clothing. "Did you sleep well, Alara?" she asked, slowly closing the physical distance between us. "I I heard what you were saying on the phone, I stammered, unable to hide my lingering shock. Vivian didn't look remotely apologetic for being caught in her ruthless act of vengeance. Instead, she reached out and gently tucked a loose strand of hair behind my ear. Her warm fingers lingered deliberately against my jaw, making my traitorous pulse race. No one gets to treat what is mine with such blatant disrespect, she stated calmly. The aggressive, possessive weight of her words sent a violent thrill straight down my spine. I am not yours, Vivian, I replied breathlessly, though my body instinctively leaned into her touch. She smiled, revealing a dark, devastatingly confident curve of her elegant lips. We have plenty of time to correct that little misconception, darling, she whispered against my skin. She stepped back slightly and turned her attention seamlessly to the professional espresso machine. Do you take your coffee the same way you did in college? She asked casually. Black, 2 sugars, and a generous dash of cinnamon? I stared at her straight back in complete and utter disbelief. We had barely spoken a dozen words to each other during our entire university tenure. Yet, she remembered my highly specific coffee order from 7 long years ago. Before I could even formulate a proper response, the soft patter of tiny feet interrupted us. Lily walked groggily into the kitchen, rubbing her sleepy eyes with tiny little fists. Vivian instantly abandoned the steaming coffee and knelt directly onto the hard floor. She didn't care at all about wrinkling her immaculate silk trousers. Good morning, little one, Vivian greeted her with a breathtakingly gentle smile. Lily didn't run to me, she walked fearlessly straight up to the formidable Ice Queen of Manhattan. Are you my new fairy godmother? Lily asked in her tiny, innocent voice. Vivian chuckled, a rich, melodic sound that instantly warmed the entire massive room. She gently scooped Lily up into her arms, settling the small girl comfortably on her hip. Something exactly like that, Vivian replied, pressing a soft kiss to my daughter's cheek. I am here to make sure you and your mommy never have to be sad or cold ever again. I watched them together, the incredibly powerful CEO holding my fragile, precious child. Hot tears prickled the corners of my eyes at the beautiful, completely impossible sight. Vivian looked over Lily's small head and locked her intense gaze directly with mine. Her blue eyes were burning with an unspoken promise of permanent safety and profound devotion. She walked purposefully over to me, carrying Lily effortlessly in her left arm. With her free right hand, she reached out and securely intertwined her fingers with mine. The 3 of us stood close together in the sunlit kitchen, looking exactly like a complete family. You don't have to fight the entire world all by yourself anymore, Alara, she murmured softly. Her thumb stroked the sensitive back of my hand, sending electric shocks up my numb arm. Let me take care of the heavy lifting from now on. I looked down at our tightly joined hands, then up at her intensely striking face. For the first time in my entire adult life, I completely stopped fighting for survival. Okay, I breathed out, giving her a tiny, tremulous smile of surrender. The undeniable triumph that flashed brightly across Vivian's face was utterly magnificent. She pulled me gently toward her until my chest pressed lightly against her warm side. I rested my heavy head against her shoulder, breathing in her intoxicating, grounding scent. The legendary Ice Queen had finally conquered my battered heart, and she didn't even have to fight a battle. She simply built an impenetrable fortress around us and locked the rest of the cruel world outside. And heaven help anyone who ever tried to break her towering walls down. The tranquil atmosphere of the sunlit penthouse was abruptly shattered by a jarring, mechanical sound. My cracked, outdated cell phone vibrated violently across the pristine surface of the marble kitchen island. The harsh noise felt like a physical blow in the otherwise perfectly quiet morning. I glanced down at the shattered screen, and my blood instantly turned to absolute ice. The name, David, flashed aggressively in bright, unforgiving letters. My ex-husband had not bothered to call me in over 8 agonizing months. He had completely abandoned Lily and me for a much younger woman when I was drowning in medical debt. He must have somehow heard the pathetic news about our humiliating eviction yesterday. A wave of familiar, suffocating nausea violently twisted my empty stomach. My trembling hand hovered uselessly over the ringing device, entirely paralyzed by old, deep-seated fear. Before I could force myself to decline the call, a meticulously manicured hand smoothly intercepted the phone. Vivian picked up the battered device with a look of terrifying, cold calculation. Her piercing blue eyes briefly met my panicked gaze, silently demanding my absolute trust. Without a single word of hesitation, she elegantly swiped the screen to accept the call and activated the speaker. Well, if it isn't the homeless failure, David's grating, arrogant voice echoed loudly through the luxurious kitchen. I heard you and the brat finally got thrown out into the garbage where you belong. My entire body flinched violently at his cruel, venomous words. Vivian's jaw clenched so tightly that a sharp, dangerous muscle ticked visibly in her cheek. The ambient temperature in the room plummeted instantly, radiating an invisible, lethal frost. You have exactly 10 seconds to explain why you are harassing my partner, Vivian stated with deadly, quiet precision. The sudden silence on the other end of the line was incredibly deafening. David audibly choked on his own breath, clearly not expecting another woman to answer my private phone. Who the hell is this? He finally stammered, his false bravado crumbling in an instant. My name is Vivian Vance, CEO of Vance Corporation, and you are currently breathing my air, she replied flawlessly. Her voice lacked any trace of anger, it was simply the chilling sound of an apex predator cornering its weak prey. I am formally informing you that Alara and Lily are now completely and permanently under my protection. I gasped softly at the sheer, undeniable weight of her public declaration. If you ever attempt to contact her, text her, or even breathe in her general direction again, I will personally dismantle your miserable life. Vivian leaned slightly closer to the microphone, her tone dropping into a dark, terrifying whisper. I will buy the pathetic logistics company you work for and fire you before lunch. I will freeze every single meager asset you currently possess. I will ensure you cannot afford a single cup of coffee in this city, let alone pay your rent. Do you understand me, David? She asked, the final question sounding more like a permanent death sentence. A frantic, terrified string of apologies tumbled incoherently from the speaker. Vivian didn't even bother to listen to his pathetic groveling. She calmly pressed the glowing red button, instantly cutting off his panicked voice. With a fluid, dismissive motion, she dropped the cracked phone straight into the stainless steel trash can. I will buy you a new one today, she murmured casually, completely unfazed by throwing away my only device. I stood perfectly frozen against the counter, my chest heaving with shallow, erratic breaths. The suffocating shadow of my abusive ex-husband had been completely obliterated in less than 60 seconds. Vivian turned her intense, consuming focus entirely back to my trembling frame. She stepped deliberately into my personal space, effortlessly backing me against the cold marble counter. Her tall, commanding presence shielded me entirely from the rest of the harsh world. She reached out, gently placing her warm hands firmly on both sides of my waist. The heat of her palms seeped instantly through the thin silk of my borrowed robe. Breathe, Alara, she commanded softly, her thumbs sweeping soothingly across my hip bones. He can never, ever hurt you again, she promised, her voice laced with a fierce, unwavering devotion. I looked up into her striking face, completely overwhelmed by the staggering magnitude of her protection. A rogue tear finally escaped my lashes, tracing a hot, wet path down my pale cheek. Vivian moved closer, eliminating the remaining fraction of space between our bodies. She gracefully lowered her head and pressed her soft lips directly against the salty tear on my skin. The startling intimacy of the gesture sent a massive shockwave of electricity straight to my core. My hands instinctively came up to rest lightly against her crisp white silk camisole. I could feel the powerful, steady drumming of her racing heart beneath my fingertips. She slowly trailed her lips down my jawline, leaving a path of burning fire in their wake. Her breath hitched slightly as she paused dangerously close to the corner of my mouth. He was an absolute fool to ever let you go, she whispered heavily against my trembling lips. But his unforgivable mistake is my greatest, most cherished reward. Her dark hair fell softly like a curtain around us, hiding us completely from the morning light. I tilted my chin up slightly, completely captivated by the magnetic pull of her heated gaze. The unspoken tension vibrating between us was thick, intoxicating, and desperately sweet. She did not push for a kiss, entirely respecting the fragile boundaries of my fresh healing. Instead, she rested her forehead gently against mine, grounding my chaotic thoughts with her absolute stability. "You belong here now," she murmured deeply, her hands pulling my waist flush against her body. And as I melted into her powerful embrace, I realized with absolute certainty that I never wanted to leave. The sleek black town car pulled smoothly to a stop in front of an exclusive Fifth Avenue boutique. Vivian stepped out first, her tailored slate gray suit commanding immediate respect from the awaiting staff. She reached back seamlessly to help me out, her firm hand wrapping securely around my waist. Lily skipped happily beside us, completely enchanted by the glittering, opulent window displays. I tugged nervously at the hem of my borrowed clothes, feeling acutely out of place in this wealthy neighborhood. The heavy glass doors were opened instantly by a fawning manager holding a crystal tray of chilled champagne. "The entire store is temporarily closed to the public for the next 2 hours, Ms. Vance," the manager announced proudly. Vivian merely nodded, her piercing blue eyes scanning the lavish interior with clinical, exacting precision. "Bring her your softest cashmeres, your finest silks, and an entirely new, comprehensive wardrobe," she instructed coolly. "And please prepare the VIP lounge with fresh toys and imported pastries for the little one." I stared in absolute shock as 5 impeccably dressed attendants rushed frantically to fulfill her casual demands. "Vivian, this is far too much," I whispered breathlessly, leaning my head close to her shoulder. She simply laced her elegant fingers intimately through mine, anchoring my trembling body directly to her side. "Absolutely nothing is too much for you, Alara," she murmured smoothly against my sensitive ear. Before I could formulate a proper argument, a sharp, unpleasantly familiar voice cut through the quiet luxury. "Well, if it isn't the tragic, ruined little housewife." I froze completely as Chloe, a notorious socialite from our old college days, emerged from a private fitting area. She had always despised my humble background, and she clearly thrived on the recent rumors of my devastating divorce. Chloe raked her highly judgmental eyes over my bare face and decidedly unbranded attire with a cruel smirk. "I heard David left you drowning in debt and completely homeless," Chloe sneered loudly for everyone to hear. "Are you begging for discarded scraps on Fifth Avenue now?" The ambient temperature in the lavish boutique dropped instantly to an absolute, terrifying 0. Vivian did not raise her voice, but her lethal posture shifted fluidly into that of a striking, dangerous predator. She stepped deliberately in front of me, shielding my fragile frame entirely with her own commanding presence. "Chloe, you always possessed an astonishing talent for profound, unmatched stupidity," Vivian stated with deadly calm. Chloe paled instantly, clearly not realizing that the formidable Ice Queen of Manhattan was standing right there in the shadows. "Vivian, I didn't see you. I was just catching up with an old acquaintance," Chloe stammered nervously, stepping backward. "She is definitively not your acquaintance," Vivian corrected her, the ice in her tone sharp enough to draw real blood. "She is my partner, and the absolute center of my entire world." My erratic heart skipped a violent beat at her uncompromising, deeply public, and shocking declaration. "Manager," Vivian called out sharply, never once breaking her terrifying eye contact with the trembling socialite. "Yes, Ms. Vance," the manager replied instantly, practically materializing at her tailored elbow. "Cancel Chloe's exclusive store membership immediately and have security escort her out the back alley door." Chloe gasped in pure, unadulterated horror, her vaunted social standing evaporating completely in a single, devastating second. "Furthermore, I am purchasing every single piece from your new designer collection for my partner," Vivian added ruthlessly. "Pack it all meticulously and have it delivered directly to my private penthouse before dinner." The thoroughly humiliated socialite was swiftly ushered out by large guards, leaving behind a profoundly shocked silence. Vivian finally turned her magnetic gaze back to me, the lethal frost in her eyes melting instantly into a warm, consuming fire. "Come with me," she commanded softly, guiding me firmly toward the opulent master-fitting room. The heavy velvet curtains slid shut securely, isolating the two of us completely from the bustling attendants outside. The confined space was intimately small, surrounded entirely by pristine, floor-to-ceiling silver mirrors. Vivian picked up a breathtaking emerald green silk gown from the plush velvet bench in the corner. "Turn around," she murmured, her voice dropping a dark, intoxicating octave in the quiet privacy. I obeyed wordlessly, my breathing turning incredibly shallow as I faced my own reflection in the large mirror. I watched her predatory grace closely as she stepped up directly behind me. Her long, graceful fingers reached out, carefully lifting the heavy mass of my hair off my sensitive, bare neck. She slowly unzipped the back of my borrowed dress, the metallic sound incredibly loud in the heavy silence. The old fabric slipped down my shoulders, exposing my pale skin to the cool, air-conditioned room. Instead of politely stepping back, Vivian leaned forward until her chest brushed lightly against my exposed shoulder blades. Her warm knuckles traced a deliberate, agonizingly slow path straight down my curved spine. A violent, unmistakable shiver tore through my entire body, betraying my sudden, desperate arousal. She smoothly slid the cold, luxurious emerald silk over my trembling, highly sensitized frame. Her strong hands lingered heavily on my waist as she pulled the delicate fabric perfectly into place. She slowly pulled the delicate zipper up, her knuckles intentionally grazing the sensitive dip of my lower back. I met her intense, darkened gaze through the flawless reflection of the silver mirror. Her icy blue eyes were blazing brightly with an undeniable, deeply possessive, and starving hunger. She wrapped her strong arms securely around my midsection from behind, pulling me flush against her solid body. She rested her chin gracefully on my bare shoulder, inhaling deeply against the warm crook of my neck. "You are so breathtakingly beautiful," she whispered hoarsely, her breath fanning hot and sweet against my skin. "It took me 7 years of absolute, agonizing hell to finally have you exactly where you belong." My hands instinctively reached up to grip her strong wrists, anchoring myself desperately against the dizzying spin of the room. "I belong here?" I asked breathlessly, my fragile voice barely hovering above a fractured whisper. Vivian pressed a soft, lingering kiss to the wildly fluttering pulse point directly below my ear. "You belong with me, Alara," she promised fiercely into the quiet, isolated space. "And I am never, ever letting you go." The reflection in the mirror showed a completely different woman than the broken, exhausted mother from yesterday. The emerald silk clung perfectly to every curve, radiating a quiet, undeniable, and stunning elegance. But it was the incredibly powerful woman holding me that truly transformed the entire picture. Vivian looked exactly like a protective deity, fiercely guarding the priceless treasure she had finally claimed. I leaned my heavy head back against her sturdy shoulder, fully surrendering to the overwhelming safety of her embrace. The chaotic, painful years of my past were rapidly dissolving into meaningless, forgotten ash. I could faintly hear Lily's innocent, joyful laughter echoing warmly from the VIP lounge outside. She was completely safe, happily eating expensive pastries while surrounded by brand new, beautiful toys. And I was standing here, wrapped entirely in the unyielding devotion of the city's most formidable titan. Vivian slowly turned me around in the confined space until we were directly facing each other. Her thumbs swept gently over my cheekbones, mapping the contours of my face with deep, staggering reverence. "No more running," she commanded softly, her forehead coming to rest intimately against mine. "No more hiding, and absolutely no more suffering alone in the dark." I closed my eyes tightly, completely overwhelmed by the sheer, staggering magnitude of her profound love. "Okay," I breathed out softly, permanently sealing the unspoken pact between our intertwined souls. She pulled me tightly into her arms again, and the rest of the cruel universe simply ceased to exist. The vibrant sunset finally faded into a deep, velvet Manhattan night. The luxurious penthouse was completely silent, except for the faint hum of city traffic far below. Lily was already fast asleep in her perfect, custom-built bedroom, clutching a brand new plush bunny. I walked softly down the long, dimly lit hallway toward the only room with the lights still on. The heavy oak door to Vivian's private study was left slightly ajar. I pushed it open tentatively, stepping into a massive space lined entirely with dark wood bookshelves. Vivian was standing silently by the towering floor-to-ceiling window, holding a crystal glass of bourbon. She had completely shed her tailored suit jacket, leaving her in a crisp white shirt with the sleeves rolled up. But my attention was instantly drawn to the large mahogany desk in the center of the room. A beautifully crafted velvet box sat wide open under the warm, focused glow of a brass reading lamp. I walked over slowly, completely unable to stop my overwhelming curiosity. Inside the velvet lining rested a seemingly random collection of entirely worthless, everyday items. There was a cheap blue plastic pen with my exact teeth marks clearly embedded in the cap. Next to it was a faded, torn concert ticket from a college festival we had both attended 7 years ago. Underneath rested a perfectly preserved photograph of me smiling widely at my university graduation. I had absolutely no idea anyone had even taken that candid, joyful picture. My breath caught painfully in my throat as the sheer, staggering magnitude of her secret hit me. These were not the casual possessions of a friendly acquaintance checking in on an old classmate. These were the desperate, carefully hidden relics of a woman who had been completely consumed by love. I picked up that pen after you dropped it during our final exams. Vivian's deep voice resonated from the shadows. I turned around quickly, clutching the sharp edge of the heavy desk to steady my trembling legs. She walked slowly toward me, her piercing blue eyes entirely stripped of their usual icy, corporate armor. I kept it because it was the only physical piece of you I actually had, she confessed softly. Why didn't you ever say anything back then? I whispered, my voice thick with sudden, unshed tears. Because you were already with David, and you looked so impossibly, blindingly happy, she replied, her tone laced with old pain. She stopped mere inches away from me, the intoxicating scent of cedar wrapping heavily around my senses. I watched helplessly from the shadows as you married a man who never deserved a single second of your time. Her jaw clenched tightly, a dangerous, dark fire igniting fiercely in her striking eyes. I spent the last 7 agonizing years building an empire solely so I could be powerful enough to fix his mistakes. I swore to myself that the second he inevitably broke you, I would be there to put the pieces back together. My erratic heart hammered aggressively against my ribs at her staggering, ruthless devotion. And what if he had never broken me? I asked, my fragile voice barely a breathless hum in the quiet room. Vivian reached out, her warm, strong hands coming to rest firmly and securely on my hips. Then I would have loved you in absolute, agonizing silence until the day I died, she stated with terrifying sincerity. The raw, bleeding truth of her profound words shattered the very last of my defensive walls. She was not merely my wealthy savior, she was my absolute destiny, waiting patiently in the dark. I reached up instinctively, sliding my trembling hands up her crisp shirt and looping them behind her neck. Vivian inhaled sharply at my bold touch, her powerful hands tightening possessively around my waist. The magnetic, unspoken tension that had been building relentlessly since the lobby finally reached its breaking point. She looked down at my slightly parted lips, a starving, desperate hunger burning brightly in her heated gaze. May I, she whispered hoarsely, asking for the one precious thing she had never dared to take. Yes, I breathed out, completely surrendering every broken piece I had left to her. Vivian closed the remaining fraction of distance instantly, pressing her soft lips firmly and hungrily against mine. The kiss was absolutely not gentle, it was a devastating, overwhelming collision of 7 years of repressed desire. I gasped softly into her mouth, my fingers tangling deeply into her dark, messy hair. She tasted intoxicatingly like expensive bourbon, dark coffee, and a desperate, agonizing longing. She pulled me flush against her solid body, completely eradicating the remaining space between us. I melted entirely into her passionate embrace, letting her intense heat burn away the last of my cold, painful past. Every single jagged piece of my broken heart felt like it was finally clicking perfectly into its rightful place. When she finally pulled back, we were both completely breathless, our foreheads resting heavily against each other. "You are absolutely mine now," she murmured fiercely against my swollen, tingling lips. And for the first time in my entire adult life, I felt truly, unconditionally free. The very next evening, the entire city was buzzing furiously with anticipation for the annual Vance Corporation Charity Gala. It was widely known as the most exclusive, highly guarded, and ruthless social event in all of Manhattan. Vivian had specifically ordered a custom, breathtaking midnight blue silk gown for me to wear. Lily was currently spinning happily in a tiny, sparkling silver princess dress that cost significantly more than my old car. I stood nervously in front of the massive penthouse mirror, my hands trembling slightly as I adjusted my diamond necklace. Vivian walked up softly behind me, her intimidating presence instantly calming my frantic, racing nerves. She was wearing a razor-sharp, flawlessly tailored black tuxedo that made her look impossibly powerful and dangerously attractive. "You look absolutely magnificent, Alara," she whispered, leaning down to press a warm, lingering kiss to my bare shoulder. "Are you completely sure about this, Vivian?" I asked, meeting her intense blue eyes in the mirror's flawless reflection. "Once we step out of that limousine, the entire world is going to know everything about us." She turned me around slowly, her strong, capable hands resting highly possessively on my waist. "That is exactly the point, my love," she stated with an absolute, terrifyingly beautiful conviction. "I want every single person in this city to know that you belong completely and exclusively to me." The luxurious ride to the Grand Hotel was a blurry haze of flashing camera lights and shouting paparazzi. When the heavy car door finally opened, a blinding wave of aggressive camera flashes instantly engulfed us. Vivian stepped out first, her cold, lethal gaze immediately silencing the chaotic, screaming crowd of reporters. She reached her elegant hand back inside the dark car, waiting patiently and firmly for me to take it. I took a deep, steadying breath, slipped my trembling hand into hers, and stepped out into the blinding spotlight. The collective, shocked gasp from the elite crowd of New York socialites was genuinely deafening. The legendary Ice Queen, who had never brought a single romantic date to any public event, was holding my hand tightly. Vivian effortlessly picked up Lily with her free arm, holding my daughter exactly like she was the most precious treasure on earth. We walked down the long crimson carpet together, projecting the undeniable image of a perfect, completely untouchable family. Inside the opulent, glittering ballroom, powerful CEOs and wealthy politicians immediately swarmed around Vivian to offer their calculated respects. Every single time someone curiously glanced at my face, Vivian would flawlessly step closer, pulling me tightly against her side. "This is Alara, my partner, and our beautiful daughter, Lily," she introduced us coldly, leaving absolutely no room for any debate. The sheer, unadulterated shock on the faces of the city's most ruthless billionaires was incredibly satisfying to witness. Halfway through the lavish, multi-course dinner, Vivian gracefully walked up to the brightly lit main stage. She tapped the microphone gently, commanding the absolute, terrified silence of the massive, crowded room in mere seconds. "I have spent the last 7 agonizing years building this corporate empire with ruthless, singular dedication," she announced smoothly. "But absolutely none of this staggering wealth or power means anything without the remarkable woman who holds my entire heart." She looked directly down at me from the elevated stage, her icy eyes burning with a dark, deeply consuming fire. "Alara is my past, my present, and my absolute, undeniable future." The entire ballroom immediately erupted into deafening applause, though I could only hear the wild, frantic beating of my own heart. She stepped down from the stage gracefully and walked purposefully straight back to our private table. Every single person in the crowded room parted silently like the Red Sea to let her effortlessly pass through. She took my slightly trembling hand, lifting my knuckles directly to her soft lips for a completely public, unapologetic kiss. A fresh, violent wave of camera flashes exploded brightly from the designated press area across the room. She completely ignored the frantic media, her intense, unwavering focus entirely consumed by my heavily blushing face. Later that night, she pulled me swiftly away from the overwhelming crowd and into a secluded, dimly lit stone balcony. The cool, crisp night air washed over us, but her tall body radiating extreme heat pressed closely against mine kept me perfectly warm. She backed me gently against the ornate stone railing, trapping me beautifully and securely between her strong arms. "You survived the Shark Tank tonight," she murmured, her soft thumb tracing my lower lip with agonizing slowness. "I wasn't scared," I replied breathlessly, reaching up bravely to run my fingers slowly through her dark, perfectly styled hair. "Because I knew with absolute certainty that you would never let anyone in that room hurt me." Vivian groaned softly, a deeply primal sound, before capturing my lips in a dark, intoxicating, and fiercely possessive kiss. She tasted exactly like expensive champagne and the absolute, overwhelming safety of a permanent, unbreakable home. I kissed her back with absolutely everything I had, intentionally sealing our unspoken promise under the watchful eyes of the city stars. My hands gripped the lapels of her custom tuxedo desperately, anchoring myself against the dizzying spin of my new reality. 7 years was a ridiculously long time to wait, I whispered against her mouth when we finally broke apart for much-needed air. "It was worth every single second of the wait to finally hold you like this," she promised fiercely into the quiet night. The explosive, chaotic aftermath of the elite charity gala finally faded into a beautifully quiet, peaceful weekend. Sunlight poured warmly through the massive floor-to-ceiling windows of our shared Manhattan penthouse. Lily was sitting happily on the plush living room rug, building a complicated tower out of colorful wooden blocks. I watched my precious daughter from the marble kitchen island, nursing a steaming mug of black coffee with cinnamon. The heavy, terrifying weight of constant survival and crippling poverty had completely vanished from my tired shoulders. Vivian walked silently into the sunlit kitchen, her bare feet making absolutely no sound on the polished hardwood floor. She was dressed remarkably casually in soft gray sweatpants and a tightly fitted white t-shirt. Yet, she somehow looked even more breathtakingly beautiful than she had in her flawlessly tailored tuxedo. She wrapped her strong arms securely around my waist from behind, pressing her warm chest directly against my back. "Good morning, my love," she murmured huskily, pressing a soft, lingering kiss to the sensitive side of my neck. "Good morning," I smiled softly, leaning my heavy head comfortably back against her solid shoulder. She reached past me and deliberately placed a thick, heavy leather folder directly onto the pristine counter. "What is this?" I asked, my fingers hesitantly tracing the gold-embossed Vance Corporation seal on the dark cover. "Open it," she instructed quietly, her firm grip tightening slightly and possessively around my midsection. I flipped the heavy cover open, my anxious eyes scanning the dense, complicated legal jargon on the very first page. My breath instantly hitched painfully in my throat as the staggering reality of the printed words finally registered. It was a legally binding, completely irrevocable trust fund set up exclusively in Lily's name. The sheer, astronomical amount of money listed on the paper would easily secure her financial future for 10 entire lifetimes. "Vivian, I cannot possibly accept this amount of money," I gasped, turning my body quickly in her arms to face her. "Keep reading, Alara," she commanded softly, her piercing blue eyes entirely devoid of any hesitation or regret. I turned with deeply trembling hands to the second thick stack of official, highly notarized legal documents. They were formal adoption papers, already fully signed and aggressively expedited by the city's most ruthless lawyers. She was legally petitioning to become Lily's second mother, permanently granting my daughter her powerful, untouchable last name. "And the final document officially transfers exactly 50% of my personal shares in Vance Corporation directly to you," she added casually. I stared at her in absolute, unadulterated shock, my overwhelmed mind completely unable to process this staggering reality. "You are giving me half of your entire corporate empire?" I whispered, my voice cracking severely under the intense emotional weight. "I built the entire empire for you, Alara," she reminded me fiercely, her soft thumb sweeping gently over my pale cheekbones. I need you to possess absolute, undeniable power so that no one in this cruel world can ever dare to touch you again. She stepped back slightly, breaking our intimate embrace only to reach carefully into the pocket of her sweatpants. My erratic heart practically stopped beating as the legendary, terrifying Ice Queen of Manhattan gracefully dropped to one knee. She looked directly up at me with an expression of such raw, bleeding devotion that it brought instant, hot tears to my eyes. She smoothly opened a small velvet box, revealing a breathtaking, flawless, custom-cut diamond ring. I designed this specific ring 5 years ago, entirely from my desperate memory of the way your eyes sparkled in college, she confessed beautifully. The heavy, emotionally charged silence in the sunlit kitchen was broken only by the soft sound of my ragged breathing. I have loved you painfully from the dark shadows, and I have loved you proudly in the blinding spotlight, she said with fierce conviction. Marry me, Alara, and let me spend the rest of my natural life proving my absolute, unwavering devotion to you. I looked down at the incredibly powerful, universally feared woman kneeling completely defenseless on my kitchen floor. Every single broken piece of my painful past had clearly led me directly to this exact, magnificent moment of salvation. Yes, I sobbed openly, dropping completely to my own knees right in front of her. Yes, Vivian, I will absolutely marry you. She let out a shaky, deeply relieved breath and carefully slid the cold, heavy diamond onto my trembling ring finger. It fit absolutely perfectly, exactly as if it had secretly belonged there since the very beginning of time. She pulled me fiercely into her chest, wrapping her strong arms around me so tightly I could barely breathe. I buried my crying face deep into her warm neck, completely overwhelmed by the staggering magnitude of her permanent love. The traumatic memories of my abusive ex-husband and the freezing rain of the city streets officially ceased to exist. Mommy! Look! Lily's cheerful, innocent voice suddenly rang out loudly from the adjacent living room. We broke apart slightly, both of us turning to see Lily proudly pointing at her newly finished block tower. It is incredibly beautiful, sweetheart, Vivian called back, her deep voice thick with overwhelming, raw emotion. Vivian looked back at me, her icy blue eyes shining brightly with completely unshed, triumphant tears. She gently cupped my face with both hands and pressed a deeply passionate, starving kiss to my willing lips. We were no longer just a desperately rescued mother and a wealthy savior temporarily hiding in a luxurious penthouse. We were a permanent, legally bound, and utterly unbreakable family standing entirely above the rest of the world. 6 months after that breathtaking sunlit morning in the penthouse, autumn painted the New York countryside in brilliant shades of gold and crimson. Vivian had aggressively purchased a sprawling, secluded historical estate upstate exclusively for our private wedding ceremony. She had absolutely refused to let the invasive media or ruthless corporate elite taint our sacred, long-awaited day. Only a very small, meticulously vetted circle of genuine friends and loyal staff were invited to witness our permanent union. I stood nervously in front of a massive antique mirror inside the estate's luxurious, sun-drenched master suite. The breathtaking wedding gown I currently wore had been secretly designed by Vivian herself over 3 agonizing years ago. It was spun from the lightest, most ethereal ivory silk and delicate French lace that felt exactly like a second skin. Every single intricate stitch seemed to loudly whisper the profound, staggering depth of her long, silent devotion. Lily suddenly burst into the quiet room, looking exactly like a literal fairy in her fluffy white tulle dress and fresh flower crown. Mommy, you look exactly like a real queen, my precious daughter gasped loudly, her tiny hands covering her mouth in pure awe. I knelt down carefully, completely ignoring the expensive silk pulling carelessly on the floor, and pulled her into a tight hug. And you are the most beautiful princess in the entire world, my sweet girl, I whispered softly into her fragrant hair. A gentle, measured knock on the heavy wooden door signaled that it was finally time to begin the ceremony. The long walk down the sweeping grand staircase felt completely surreal, exactly like stepping directly into a vivid, beautiful dream. The massive, glass-enclosed conservatory had been entirely transformed into a stunning indoor forest of white roses and trailing emerald ivy. Golden afternoon sunlight filtered perfectly through the transparent ceiling, bathing the entire room in a warm, heavily romantic glow. But I barely noticed the breathtaking floral arrangements or the soft, elegant string quartet playing in the background. My entire universe was instantly reduced to the striking, impossibly gorgeous woman waiting for me at the end of the aisle. Vivian wore a completely custom, immaculate white tuxedo that starkly contrasted her usual dark, intimidating corporate attire. Her dark hair was styled loosely, softly framing her striking face and highlighting the razor-sharp cut of her elegant jawline. As my eyes locked securely onto hers, I physically saw the legendary, universally feared Ice Queen completely melt away. Her icy blue eyes were entirely swimming with unshed tears, burning brightly with a raw, overwhelming, and totally unmasked love. Lily skipped happily down the aisle ahead of me, tossing white rose petals with absolute, uncoordinated, and innocent joy. When I finally reached the flower-draped altar, Vivian immediately reached out and seized both of my trembling hands. Her grip was intensely possessive yet incredibly gentle, securely anchoring me against the overwhelming rush of my own chaotic emotions. "You are an absolute vision, Alara," she whispered hoarsely, her deep voice cracking slightly under the immense emotional weight. "You look pretty spectacular yourself, Ms. Vance," I smiled back tearfully, my thumb brushing softly over her white knuckles. The actual wedding vows were an incredibly intimate, breathless blur of soft promises and profound, unbreakable commitments. "I spent 7 years watching you from the cold shadows, terrified I would never get to hold the sun," Vivian declared fiercely. "But today, I am legally binding my entire soul to yours in front of the only people who truly matter to us. I promise to fiercely protect you, to endlessly cherish you, and to literally never let a single drop of rain touch you again." I looked deeply into her captivating eyes, knowing with absolute, unshakable certainty that she meant every single word. "You did not just legally save my life, Vivian, you completely resurrected my shattered, broken heart," I replied, my voice shaking with deep gratitude. "I am absolutely yours, today, tomorrow, and for the rest of eternity." When the officiant finally pronounced us legally married, Vivian did not wait a single, agonizing second longer. She pulled me flush against her solid body, completely ignoring the cheering crowd, and captured my lips in a devastating kiss. It was a kiss that tasted heavily of absolute triumph, total surrender, and the permanent, beautiful end of a 7-year wait. The private reception that followed was filled with warm laughter, exquisite food, and a profound, deeply relaxing peace. We danced slowly under a canopy of twinkling fairy lights, our bodies moving perfectly together in total, unspoken harmony. Later that evening, long after the tired guests had retired to their respective suites, the three of us retreated to our room. The massive stone fireplace crackled warmly, casting dancing golden shadows across the luxurious, heavy velvet curtains. Lily had fallen completely asleep the exact second her little head hit the plush pillows of the oversized master bed. I stood silently by the large window, looking out at the sprawling, moonlit estate that now legally belonged to my completely rebuilt family. Vivian wrapped her strong arms securely around my waist from behind, her warm chin coming to rest comfortably on my bare shoulder. She was wearing exactly the same midnight blue silk robe she had wrapped me in on that very first, desperate, freezing night. "What are you thinking about, Mrs. Vance?" she murmured softly, pressing a hot, lingering kiss to the sensitive curve of my neck. "I was just thinking about that terrifying, freezing lobby in Manhattan," I confessed quietly, leaning my weight entirely against her solid frame. I had exactly $14, a completely useless eviction notice, and absolutely zero hope left in the entire world. Vivian's strong grip around my midsection tightened fiercely, her lethal protective instincts instantly flaring at the painful memory. "That timeline is permanently and completely erased, Alara," she stated with dark, unyielding, and absolute authority. "I will literally burn the entire world to the ground before I ever let you feel that level of cold again." I turned around slowly in her arms, wrapping my hands securely behind her neck and gazing straight up into her beautiful face. "I know you absolutely would," I smiled softly, my chest swelling with an impossible, staggering amount of unconditional love. "But you don't ever have to burn anything down anymore, Vivian. We finally have absolutely everything we could ever possibly need right here in this quiet room. She looked deeply into my eyes, the last remaining traces of her long, painful, 7-year wait completely dissolving into the peaceful night. She lifted me effortlessly off the wooden floor, carrying me carefully toward the massive bed where our daughter slept soundly. We lay down together softly, pulling the heavy down comforter over the three of us to permanently seal out the rest of the cruel universe. Vivian pulled me tightly against her chest, her steady, powerful heartbeat drumming a permanent, highly soothing lullaby against my ear. The terrifying, agonizing storm that had relentlessly battered my life for so long was finally, completely, and truly over. I closed my eyes with a deep, contented sigh, wrapped entirely in the suffocatingly sweet, unyielding devotion of the legendary Ice Queen. The woman who had loved me entirely in secret for 7 long years had finally, permanently, brought me all the way home.